Let's see. Okay, I did that. Okay, one more acoustic thing. I have to do acoustic jazz styles, and then I'm going to switch to electrics. When jazz was early, they didn't have guitar players. They had banjo players. They didn't have drummers. That idea of a drummer with a trap set came around in the 20s. Before that, they had banjo players. It was the banjo player that kept time for the entire band. You could barely hear them. I mean, banjos aren't that great. Sorry, Tony. Banjos aren't that great to start with. Tony Trisk is a friend of mine. I know he may see this sometime. I'm going to apologize to him right now. They're not as pretty sounding as a guitar. And they had them back there, and they were chunka like a banjo player. They had 4 strings. And his purpose was to keep the band, to give tempo to the band. That was his job. Now, some of these guys, out of frustration, became fabulous rhythm players. They would play lots of chord shapes. They got real good on these 4 strings, making all these crazy chords all the time while they're playing that nobody could hear. All they could hear was, you know what I mean? You can't hear them. If you listen to those old recordings, you hear in the background, but you can't hear the actual pitches. But these guys were really cool. A zillion chords going all the time. When Lloyd Loar started designing guitars for Gibson, you know those cool guitars with the F-holes in them? That's called an F-hole. Actually, in France, they call it a landaulet. They're on violins, and you may have seen them on a carriage. It's a decoration that would be on the side of a carriage. There were two popular decorations in France. One was the fleur-de-lis, which you're familiar with, I believe, and also this landaulet shape. Well, they take that landaulet, which we call F-holes, and he made that into a guitar. He said, it looks so cool on a piano, it's going to look really cool on a guitar. Yeah, it did look really cool. It sounded terrible. I mean, it's a bad idea. A flat-top guitar, it's got everything working for it. That idea, have you ever played a violin with a pick? Have you ever played a violin with a pick? It doesn't sound good. It goes plonk, plonk, plonk. Well, it's the same thing on a guitar that's made like a violin. It's going to go plonk, plonk, plonk. It doesn't sound like this. If you strum a chord on those earlier guitars, it goes plonk, and that's the end of it. There's a ring, and it has no sound. But they look so cool. Everybody had to have one. So these 4-string guitar players would buy these early Gibson guitars that were 4 strings, and they continued doing their banjo chords on them. That style of guitars is gone now. It's dead. No one studies that style of guitar playing anymore. It's a specific rhythm guitar style that's now gone. Nobody's interested in that kind of music anymore, and so nobody's interested in that style of guitar. Except me. You know what I mean? You've seen the movies with those old movies that you're talking about, but it'd be not Count Basie, Duke Ellington, and he'd be at the piano, we'd be playing and mugging to the camera the whole time. This kind of stuff. It's so stupid. Thankfully, over time, when the '60s came in, people started writing. Josh and I were talking about it this week about the singer-songwriter. It used to be just singers, and there were songwriters, and then there were singers, and then around the '70s. They became the same person in rock music. The guys would write that was very unusual. That was a revolution in the music industry. Singers were singers, and they bought songs from songwriters. And then the Beatles came along and people after them who actually wrote their own songs. Well, that whole industry of the songwriter industry that freaked them out. What do we do now? And kind of went away. You've heard of Burt Bacharach, Lieber and Stroller, Carole King, so many guys that used to work together in the Brill building, and they wrote all those hit songs during the 50s and 60s. They were the last of that. It was the final last gasp, really, of that industry. Not that professional songwriters don't exist anymore, but it used to be a real big business. Now it's just hit or miss now for songwriters. So you get the idea on that style. It's a very specific style that I'm sure nobody's